Council of Security, or European, and only NATO did these decisions that we will intervene, that we will attack. One day of airstrikes, stop the war, stop the killing. Why we waited 3 years for that? When you hear the answers, very often it was not a strategic, or security thing, it was the culture behind that. We were very hesitant in the West to use arms to intervene. Yeah, because we believed in peace. So our strategy at that time was to give humanitarian help to the victims, send medicines, send no harm. Because we believe that in our European peace world and values, it is against our values to help somebody with military weapons at that time. I don't know if you remember, if you know, it was an embargo to help Bosniaks in Yugoslavia with the weapon at that time. And 10,000 of people died in Sarajevo and Bosnia over these 3 years. And there is no other answer, explanation of this waiting than culture. Something was, blocking us to do what should be done. Because we had this mindset inside that better not to take weapons and help with that. Yes, that, okay, we are human beings, so we will help with humanitarian aid, but anything else is not in our competence or responsibility at that time. And being inside, as I was working at that time with Tadeusz Mazowiecki, who was, the representative of international community for former Yugoslavia. At that time, it was very hard for the people to hear that, that we will not help you with military weapons. Because what it meant in, narratives, that you barbarians, you are fighting using, this war and weapons and so on, but we are civilized people, we can help you with humanitarian aid, but nothing else. And this contradiction between being, in peace country, in peace Europe, peaceful Europe, being civilized, and then to see others, engage in the war because there was no other way for them to exist, was really unhuman, in fact. Yeah, because, and very, very hard to, to accept for the victims. In the situation with Ukraine, there's a big change, also not absolute, that the world is helping with military aid, with weapons to Ukraine, with some exceptions of, the sky is still not saved over the Ukraine. What would be from the first day of the war, the NATO or international community will decide that they will, guard the sky. Yeah? So it's always these decisions, which are somehow rooted in the way how we understand our values, how we understand our responsibility, how we understand our presence as human beings. That's why I want not to avoid the subject of war and culture. is that this, after many, many years of this, you know, the peace and culture, peace culture, that was the dominant thing in Europe for decades. We were devoted to the peace and culture. But in meantime, at the same time, we equipped with military arms the dictators like Putin in a full way. So the peace culture didn't stop. Giving arms to dictators because it was a business. You know, it was the belief that the peace in Europe is built on the trade, of the free market, of the business. That's how we believe that peace could be achieved. Yeah, we're developing the economy. We built European Union as an economical project, then political project, and we will have this eternal peace. But at the same time, as I mentioned you, the war was all over, the colonies and so on, till the Chechnya, till Syria. You know, Germany and France equipped Putin after 2014. Yes, after annexation of Crimea, after Donbass, after Syria, they still were selling the weapons to Russia. And still it was, you know, this belief that we are keeping and we are safeguard of peaceful Europe. But in the cost, in what kind of cost? You know, the war was, of course, far away, somewhere, you know, in the world. But the victims of the war, it was our responsibility very much. So that's why I have the problem, you know, with this term peace culture. And I want to talk about war culture. To understand that war is with us, and we should find the way to defeat the aggressors. And to be victorious. And I think, and this is another dimension, and another big thing in the lesson of Ukraine we have today, in my mind, Peremocha. You, Ukrainians, put at stake for the first time after many, many years, the Peremocha. Which means that we understand that only defeating evil, we will survive. We will have freedom and everything else. You see, and here and now, because how it happened with my generation, for many, many years, decades, that we were believing in good values, like peace, like human rights, like democracy and so on. But at the same time, we were always defeated in all the corners of the world. Yeah, we were on the good side, with good values, but defeated. And always it happens, you know, that consensus was okay, it should be like that because there is no alternative to that. That we should pay the price for the compromise, for conformism and everything, because there is no other way to avoid it, to solve it. And we didn't solve anything, in fact. We were only preparing the ground for these dictators to be stronger. So, and this is also something what can exist in the culture. You know, this belief that the victory is possible only in the other world, in heaven. There is a famous Serbian myth in the mythology, national mythology of Kosovo battle. And now, of course, historians now quarrel who was victorious in the fact of this battle, but the national mythology after that was for many years, and I saw how it is put into practice in the war in former Yugoslavia, was that we are defeated here and now by other powers, Muslim powers in the Battle of Kosovo, of Sultan powers, but in heaven we will be the winners. And the only way to be the winner in this world is in the heaven. So there is no chance. So that when you read it directly, it means that somehow there is no chance to be a winner here and now in a real life. And because of that, you should make all the kinds of compromises around that. And now we have this position which goes like a message to the world from Ukraine that the peremocha is on the stake. When I teach and talk, with students and people in other countries, I even tend to learn them the word peremocha, that it should become international like nonviolence of Gandhi. That they should learn peremocha as something what gives something new and new hope and new value in our life. And the peremocha is on the stake. And of course, telling this here, I understand how risky it is. What is the price of this peremocha? How many people died already? When I was traveling by car yesterday from Poland to Lviv, I was crossing small towns and villages, and on each cemetery I saw fresh graves with Ukrainian flags, understanding that almost each place, each small settlement in Ukraine sacrificed the lives to that war. So the cost is huge of that, but this was and still is the choice you did here and your people did, and the way we should deal with that, I think, is that we should not only understand that, but we should make it as a value also in other parts of the world, to be part of this struggle, part of this war. To be part that the war in Ukraine is ours, in Poland, in Germany, in the United States, means that we also should fight for peremocha. That in our daily decisions, struggles, we should start to believe that maybe there are possibilities to struggle, about the values in that direct sense, not saying that it is impossible or for the heaven only. So we are somehow responsible for our own here and today life and decisions made. So not to escape from the responsibility of making change and defeat the evil. Another thing, what I see with this culture and war dichotomy is imperial culture, or the way how empire could use culture for their own purpose and benefits. I think it was yesterday that Pope Francis said trying to explain why he made this terrible statement about to young Russians in Petersburg, St. Petersburg, that they should be proud of the imperial history of Katerina and Peter and big culture, Russian culture. When journalists asked him yesterday why he said it, in explanation he uses terms that culture is never imperial. That his belief is that the beauty of Russian culture is somehow independent from the politics or empire strategies and so on, which I think is the core of the problem, because culture can be used by empire in a very smart way, and to think about how we can counter it. It's tells us a lot about culture as well. One of the way, very simple, how empire is using culture is saying or supporting this statement that culture is marginal. That's how it happened in our liberal democracies. Culture is marginal. When the war in former Yugoslavia ended, and there was, international community table about building the program for revitalization of Yugoslavia after the war, there was no room for cultural education around the table. So culture was not convinced as a player for rebuilding the country after the war, although that war was very often called the culture war in former Yugoslavia. But it very much happened, in the situation in Poland after joining European Union. There was, this claim of receiving support from European Union to revitalize or rebuild Poland after communist time. And very often the culture was, again, not in the budget, not in as an investment position in that sake. So we use mostly this money for building roads in a symbolic way. When we have this program for so-called civilizational development, rozwój cywilizacyjny, tak? Civilizational development, our politicians, also from liberal democratic parties like Platforma Obywatelska, Civic Platform, used to say, so first we should engage in building roads. I use it as symbolic, some hard business-oriented things. And now, mostly people use these good roads to leave their regions, their provinces. There is a big gap and this space, because there is no life in the small regions, no development, because the education is low, there's small numbers of cultural centers and so on and so on. And this is how empire is. So in my reading, you can see Brussels also in the European Union as a kind of a bigger brother, giving you money, giving you support. And they did not have interest of supporting our educational process in advance, to invest in education and culture. They liked that, we will have good roads and we will have good opportunities also from people from the West, to make business and so on. But there was no their responsibility about thinking about culture and education. But I think that is how our elites were colonized in the past. That still we have in Poland not this emancipation of political elites to understand that our emancipation is very much about education and culture. So they were like taking this cliché, okay, everything is market oriented, everything goes, to the business, to the economy and so on. So we put it on the margins, and that's how empire likes it. Yeah, because the competence of culture is in the center. Yeah, we are transmitters of culture and civilization. So to overcome this discrepancy, is very much to regain the culture as an important field for rebuilding responsibility, democracy building, and so on. My concern is what will happen in Ukraine after the war. How we can help not to make the same mistakes. As usual, it happens. What will be your, as a society, position about that? That you will hear all the time, okay, culture could be later. There's more urgent things for today and tomorrow. Just wait. It's another kind of marginalization of that. Yeah, we respect culture. Yeah, we like it very much, but it can wait. Don't think about it as an investment. What the Germans used to say, Bildung. That's how they revitalized their country after the war. In Europe, you have a very strong Germany, also in economy, but they invested from the very beginning in culture and education with France together. For example, meaning the whole network of so-called European houses along the border with France and Germany after 1945. For many years, organic investment in small communities, in regions, for building this spiritual, ethical, moral, that, how you can overcome this engagement in fascism, in Germany without culture. Market will not do it. Yeah, so you understand that you should invest the salary. I remember, from my discussions with Germans, the salary of the teacher in the 40s in Germany was the same as the director of fabric. That's how, in a practical way, they did it. Yeah, the teacher was the really respected, crucial figure for that recovery. Of course, there's another issue, how empire works with culture and making others enslaved, subdue, is a term of the understanding of eternity. What empire is tending to say to us is that we are the people in power, the people building the empire. We are eternal. That there is no other way to be present in this world than ours way. That it means, okay, you can struggle, you can have your ideas, but you are idealist, you are utopian, you are not realist. Because the real thing is the power of the empire. And it always was like that, and it will be. So when only you will understand that always was like that the world is built like that, you are enslaved by the empire. And that's the narrative the empire is making on us, putting on us. Well, you are struggling, you have all these revolutions, protests, and everything, but it will, sooner or later, it will come back to as it was, because there is no alternative to that. And sometimes people, experiencing a lot of suffering, tragedies and so on, start to believe that there is no other way to cope with that. That we should accept, and it gives us the freedom when you accept the reality as it is imposed on you. There is a book of Gustav Grudziński, who was a Gulag prisoner, Polish writer, spending a lot of years, in Gulag in the 40s, and after that he wrote a very famous book, Inny Świat, Other World. And he's describing the meeting with a Russian woman in the Gulag, a friend who was risking his life, renting him, giving him a book of Dostoevsky, Wspomnienia z domu umarłych, remembering of the House of Death, this novel of Dostoevsky, being in the prison and so on. And when Herling started to read this book in Gulag, he has on the walls of his barrack this graffiti, of former prisoners, 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 60 years ago, 100 years ago. There were always prisoners here. There was always empire here putting, enslaved people here. And suddenly he realized that if he will accept this necessity, of being all the time like that, so the world is like that it will all repeat, all the time will repeat itself, and he suddenly feels, oh, I should escape from that because I will be enslaved in the other world, in the Inny Świat. So the way for him and for his Russian friend, it was a way to feel free. She was reading Dostoevsky like, making free herself. Okay, I'm suffering, but it was always like that. And it will be always like that. So the decision of, no, like screaming of Herling, no, I disagree. There is alternative. There is a way of taking responsibility for our own things in our hands. That's how it was, by the way, this shift from, in Greek literature, ancient literature, when you have the Greek tragedy, these masterpieces of Greek tragedy, it is exactly the moment when Europeans started to take the responsibility of their life in their hands. Euripides, Sophocles, they were the first to tell that we are responsible for our lives and we can change everything around. This is culture also, that you find the way of not accepting what they offer you like eternity, like always it was like that. Timothy Snyder, who wrote the book Unfreedom, the Road to Unfreedom, an excellent book, I recommend to you very much. He uses this category of eternity as a political one, as the category, for example, Trump and Putin is taking for their strategies, to make politics eternal, no change. Always was like that. And this is how the empire works with that. And maybe the last point, before I will try to say you some positive and constructive way out of that things, is that what empire is doing with us is making us to believe that culture is like an autonomous kingdom, cut off the real daily life. Our freedom as culture people, as artists, is our individual freedom. We want to have freedom of speech. We want to have our freedom of the individual expression. That's how the freedom was understood very much in modern culture. And Putin and other empires do not have problems with that. Okay, do what you want, but keep aside the political life. Keep aside the public life. Enjoy your autonomous kingdom. That's fine with me. I'm not about, I'm not concerned about you are anti-Putin or pro-Putin. Doesn't matter for me. What matters for me is that you as a cultural people are an independent, autonomous cultural kingdom. And enjoy it. Because you can't do anything not to change, to be really like a threat to these authoritative governments and dictatorships and so on. So, and this is like I call it like a silent rejection or I lost this zdrada?
Betrayal.
Betrayal, thank you. Like a silent betrayal of the Greeks, which was based, the belief of Greeks was based that the beauty, the good, and the truth works together only. There is no good without the beauty. There is no beauty without the good. And there is no truth without good. Kolakagatia, the unity of these three things. What we did in modern culture, and I think it's something what the lesson of Ukraine today shows us, is that we betrayed this unity. That we easily separating good from beauty. In culture, in art it happened. To give you an example, Petr Handke, the supporter of Milošević regime, and a writer, an Austrian writer, who was saying that Srebrenica probably didn't happen, or who knows who was responsible for Srebrenica, won the Nobel Prize a few years ago. And of course there were many protests in the world against it, but the explanation of the jury and the defender of Handke was, but why you mix his political position, his support with Milošević, with his art of writing? He's a great drama writer. He's a great writer. So we in the free world do not judge people because of the engagement in good or evil, but we judge them on the beauty. And we awarded them as a genius of music, philosophy and other things and so on. And at that time, when it happened, there was a Srebrenica case, it was a former Yugoslavia war, there were some protests against Handke, but they were somehow smashed on the world scene. There was enough power to defend him as an autonomous art writing creator. But I wonder if it could be happened today. Thanks to Ukraine, I think. What you and your writers, your artists, your people of culture did in the world is putting against this question: should we make the separateness of these two things, three things, or it works together? For people experiencing the war, this is exactly what happened with me in Sarajevo and in Bosnia. I lost this belief of autonomous art culture kingdom at that moment, very immediately. When you are in the center of the war, experiencing it, you can't divide these things. That's what war is doing with you, in a positive way. There are many negative things about the war, terrible things. But there are some positive things. In moral sense, war is making you unable to differentiate between these two things. Yeah, that you again feel it as kalopagatos. It goes together. I was in Russia, I think it was 2008, when they announced this Kandinsky Prize, you know, the main prize for the artists in Russia. And at the very beginning, this award was given to Belayev, the fascist artist in Russia. And he used even the fascist chauvinistic symbolic in his art pieces, in his pictures. And there were some protests in Moscow against this decision. But in jury, there were people not only from Russia, there were people from Guggenheim Foundation, from New York, from Deutsche Bank, from Germany, and so on. And the way they defended the decision was, there is a freedom of speech. Why you want us, you protesters, to deal with these political issues and so on public issues? There is an autonomous, artistic way to do things. And Belayev very quickly became, you know, supporter of Dugin and Putin fascism and so on. But that's how the Western culture is, you know, unarmed in a way, facing such kind of situation, and even without bad intentions, supporting the fascism and growing such kind of ideologies and so on. So again, I think this is a war, the Ukrainian lesson to us. And when I talk about this now, when you know, when you people from Ukraine, mostly, but you know, started to put in question the presence of Russian cultural artists, you know, writers, singers, conductors, and so on, suddenly words started to think about the problem behind that. Not solving immediately, not being, you know, convinced immediately, but at least there is something you from Ukraine put in the center of this discussion as a problem. Okay, and now to put this reflection toward the practice. So I discussed how culture and war are connected, and some critical views on the culture, and how it is easy to make culture supporter for imperial ideologies and strategies. The question is what we should do. What could be the answer to that? What me personally, but you as a future humanist, cultural practices, artists, academics, what we can do facing these issues? One of my answers is the concept of small center of the world. That's the title of my book. Olena was mentioning, but in short, to explain you the philosophy, the core philosophy of this concept is that the empire, the center, the big number, that's how empire is doing in that world, how the evil is working in the world is in big numbers, in big organisms, you know, that believe, you know, it's like the biblical Goliath, that we like the big, we like the center, we like everything what goes, you know, beyond people's heads, you know, in something what is huge, media-oriented, you know, having impact to the crowds of people. When we, as a culture people, as a humanist, when we start to believe in that way, that everything what makes sense in our activity concerns also big numbers, big events, big festivals, then we are lost in the hands of Goliath. He likes it. He don't fear against another Goliath who we want to build against him. The fear of big Goliath is about the David, the small man, simple, honest, not having this involvement and engagement in a center-oriented, big number-oriented things, being free out of that. That's why I think about small centers of the world. The first thing is that they are small. That we start again to respect small. Not being afraid that even if you are meeting like here, it's a big audience, but it's still a small group of people. But we can do something. And it makes sense that we share our ideas here. And maybe a small step of some practical things will come out of that. It makes sense. It is real. It is real and something very important that you will start care about your playground for your children around your house. That you will invest some good willings, but also support to the kindergarten, to the level of your school education. In a small culture, practices and so on. It makes sense because small, only small, it is paradoxical, but only small can change the world. And usually it happened in the history. When you look about the change makers, it always started with the small things. And believe in the sense of small, which is very uncomfortable in the world of market economy, of globalization of the world, and so on and so on. But that's how these new powers of empire, of a Goliath, works in that world. To give you untrust, to discredit the small. This is the winning of them. When you will lost your belief in small, you are in their hands. Center. Here in Szeptycki building in Yuku, we can be in the center of the world. This is our center. It's not necessary to look around to some bigger Oxford or Sorbonne centers. Here we can do everything best, and with agreement with our ambitions. Here we can do it. Here is the center. In a small town we are living, in a small district of the city. We can build a center, and it will be the center most important, like an Axis Mundi, for our activities. You can do, I am coming to Ines from a small town, say 6,000 people. But over the 30 years of working with people, we build some kind of trust that we can make in this small town the most important things in the world, if we want. And have with us, the most interesting people from the world to work with us on that. But if it is a center of the world, it means that it makes you somehow engage in something broader than your particular things and problems in your community. The world is your challenge. You want to change the world. Don't afraid to change it, that it is, marginal, that it is in the province, so it's the corner, and without any influence on impact on the world. In contrary, it should be open in the way that your rootedness, because center is also something like being rooted, like Greek oikos, rebuilding, this community polis around you. But it should be open to the world. Yes, it should be, co-responsible, co-independent with the others, with ecology issues, with human issues, and so on. That's my answer in practice, to give the response, the counter-argument to these powers of evil and empire in the world. And maybe on that point I will stop and open the discussion.
Thank you so much for your so important and I think thought-provoking speech. For me it's not even a lecture, because lecture is, from some point it's like sharing knowledge, but that was also sharing the very process of self-reflection. I remember the concept which was proposed by anthropologist Clifford Geertz, risky thinking. That is about self-reflection and readiness to be changed in the process of reflection. Yes, I'm almost ready to open our Q&A section. We have not a lot of time, we have about 10 minutes, so I propose to collect maybe for the very beginning 3 questions, and then we will see if we will still have some time, we will continue. So I see the first one, the second one, and the third one, yes, and then, okay, one more circle.
So, good afternoon, Kshistov. It's a very big pleasure to meet you. And I have a question about our cultural advocacy and diplomacy, because as we can see, our brand of Ukraine is it has a big, good impact on how others see us. So what about our cultural diplomacy? Because how to make our soft power explain our intentions harder, because it's about a long-term run. So what are the key actions to make bigger changes, even in small actions like you mentioned before? Thank you.
Please, for the next question.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for your lecture. And my question is, what can we do as students, as Ukrainian students, to make Western people accept, like you said, war culture and not peace culture?
Good evening. My question is always the same. Why Europe can't change its mindset about non-violence environment, and what can be done in order them to understand that the war is something that is always with us?
Okay, I will respond to all these 3 questions, which have something together. I think the first, I would say, about your narrative to the world, which is something of crucial importance. And from the beginning of this war, I understand that Ukrainians and friends of mine feel this responsibility after many years of being silent under the empire and, having the voice taken out, that we want to say in our names and in our view of our experience. And it is, I believe, very powerful and new thing. that suddenly we have the voice of Ukraine, and there's growing interest of Ukrainian books, literature, artists, people taking part in the discussion. But that's, I think, what should be even stronger and stronger. But the next stage of the answer, of your answer, would be what you manage to do here and now in your circumstances, and how you can put this experience, this responsibility you have toward the sacrifice of life during the war and anything else, that how you will put it into the practice here in Ukraine, changing the world from your small centers here. And it will be another step, I think, and crucial. What I mean by that is, should it be, because the problem we had in Central Eastern Europe, in Poland after 1989, in short, was that we were more or less mimicking the West. That we took this position that everything was solved and good in the West, so we should somehow replicate in our ground, in Poland, in Czech, Romania, and so on, the models from the West. I think you are here in a different position. Your answer will be not replicating. Your answer will be finding new ways, new practices, new ideas. That's how I think our cooperation could develop, and how we can build a new Central Europe, for example. It's another discussion, that we have something here in Ukraine, in Romania, in Poland, in Lithuania, something together to, as an answer we can give to the world. So not only, so you are the leaders now, but I see it that we can build not only the solidarity around the immigrants from Ukraine in this part of Europe, but the solidarity of giving new ideas and practices. And that's how I would see also the cultural diplomacy you are asking, that we are some, and I would say it is an expectation, very interesting, from the West, because West has less and less answers to the problems. This is a big crisis of values in the West. What we thought about, this non-violence, peace policy, and so on. It is over, but there is nothing replacing it in a positive way. So it is a huge vacuum now to fulfill with something new, and it is in your hands. Yeah? We can take it as not mimicking, not taking, and you was absolutely right. Coming here, I didn't come with really, concept and ideas. It's really, I put myself also coming to Ukraine in a position of, opening for something I never thought and thought before. Yes, the situation, the tragedy of Ukraine, challenging me not to replicate something I know from the past. Yeah, I'm challenged by you also to do new things, to develop new reflection around this. So that would be, I think, the answer. And also, you look about our language. It is our prison, the language. I'm still struggling with things like, because does it happen that Ukraine answer with violence to the violence? Or the self-defense is not a violence? But in our language, look, we have this violence to violence. You took weapon in your hands, you use violence. But for me, it's not a definition of violence. You are not violating anything, defending yourself. So it's all the time this work step by step, also changing our language categories and prisons. That what I tell you about killing or not killing, yes, that we are Christians, so we do not kill. It's not working like that. Yeah? It's half truth. And we should understand and go more deeply in reflecting on the languages, values we had now. So it's a challenge of new dictionary, new language we will use also for our practices. Very much.
Thank you so much. We still have several minutes for one more session for 3 questions. If you're ready to ask. Yes or no, please. Yeah, 1. So I'm still looking for some more questions.
Hi, do you think it is possible to stop wars with war culture? And if not, then does it even make sense to promote it instead of peace culture?
I simply believe that only way to stop the war is to be aware that it exists, that it works like an arm of evil, and not reject it, not escape from this knowledge. So it's that's the reason I'm putting, I embracing war in the organism of culture. It's part of us. This is like in medicine, sometimes this way of healing you is to take your sickness into your body and healing it from inside. So, because when you will pretend that there is no war, that the mission is only about peace and so on, you lost this possibility that you will overcome it, from its side. So that's, I think, the weakness and kind of escapism we practice. This kind of comfort zones. So we live in peace, we build culture, peace culture, and so on. So we don't engage, in such things. We are humanists. We had a discussion in Poland with the philosopher when, there was an action to raise money for buying a drone for Ukrainian army, which I was involved also in that. But we were attacked by our friends humanists from philosophy department that how you can raise money for drone, for the weapon, being humanists. That we are anti-Putin, of course. We are pro-Ukrainian, of course. But we have problem with raising money for the drone. Yes, you understand this difference. So no, it is inside. It is part of us. This kind of support and engagement and so on. Because otherwise you are betrayed, it is a kind of betrayal for your humanity. That's how I understand it, that you leave your partners, your Ukrainians behind, on this edge of, being, engaged in military conflict, and it is not ours. No, it is our war.
Thank you so much, and as I see, we are limited by time, so we have to stop here, but not to end here, because we'll discuss many of your ideas within our course. At least the basic idea that people are created by culture or cultures, but culture is also created by people. And that is also about being responsible. So, and the last thing I would like to say, that is about how the very idea of this lecture appeared. At the very beginning, I also asked Kshistov to send me an extract of this lecture, very short description of this lecture. And it was written in English, but only one word was written in Ukrainian, and it was the word перемога. So I would like to conclude this lecture with this one word as an international one, перемога. So thank you again, and we are looking forward to your next lecture for our students at Ukrainian Catholic University. Thank you.
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!